Welcome to Church Media HQ. I am your host, Luke Clayton, and before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you to take a moment to subscribe. Wherever you're listening to podcasts, we're available on just about any podcast platform out there, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and more. Or if you are watching on YouTube, just subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you will be the first to know when we drop new content like this. And lastly, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us get seen by more church leaders just like you. Now, today we are having a conversation with Church Media HQ contributor and Church Media HQ regular, Jeremy Lenentine. Jeremy is a outreach pastor in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, which is in the greater Albuquerque area, and he's got a lot of insight on marketing, outreach, and just working in church in general. So enjoy today's conversation with Jeremy Lenentine. So let's dive right into it today. A little bit of I don't know, maybe it's controversial depending on who you are. So let's talk about. I think we had decided today to talk about politics, and we are at time of going live here. We're on January 21st, so we just got a new president yesterday, and obviously a very heated election cycle. And really a very heated 4 years, past 4 years, if you will, on the political spectrum. And something that I've observed is that this has been kind of the most that I've noticed. It's been the most active I have seen church leaders. And I think it's not just because of who the president was. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that social media is in full swing now and really playing a huge pivotal part in all ways of life. But yeah, just very vocal about, where they stand on politics, and, some people more, I guess, in your face about it than others. I know you, Jeremy, though, you have a pretty, when it talks about political involvement, I mean, you're involved, and I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm going to let you kind of let everybody know how they are, or how you are involved in politics.
Yeah, so I'm involved, but more so on the local level. So I mean, like a lot of people, especially if you're a Christian, things matter to you about the state of our country, and so I was kind of liked and followed politics probably just the last, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, but just voted and kind of tried to get to know the candidates a little bit. But then 3 years ago, there was a guy in town who went to another church similar to ours. We become friendly and everything, and he became the mayor of our city, I think 6 years ago. So on his first and his second campaign, I kind of helped him and held signs and met with people, went out in the community a little bit for him, just so that we could have a good Christian mayor in our city, and that'd be good for us. And then about 3 years ago, he came to me we were just having a men's Bible study at Chick-fil-A, and he said, "Hey, look, there's this opening on the city council, and I'd like for you to apply for it and consider being on the city council." I had worked at the church here for 5 years. At that point, I was 33 years old, and so I told him, I said, "Well, look, I don't mind applying at all, but I'm sure I'm like way underqualified, and that no one would want to choose me." And he said, "Well, the way it works is I get to pick who it is, and then the other counselors, they'll vote on you, but it's my choice if we're filling a seat. And two, you're going to be more qualified than you think." So I said, okay. So I filled it out, turned it in or whatever else. And then he called me and said, "All right, hey, we picked you." So I went to a meeting, and there's 5 counselors at that time, and they voted, and 4 of them voted for me and 1 voted against. And that was it. That was enough to be on the council. So kind of dove in, not knowing anything about it at all, tried to go to some classes that they offer to get people caught up and everything. But I've been doing that for 3 years now. Last year, I had an election in March of 2020, And I got out early, got a lot of signs out as soon as I could, and nobody ran against me. So it ran unopposed, which automatic win there. And then I've got another election in 2 years in 2022 to get me back on the 4 year cycle, to where you'd only have to run every 4 years. But yeah, I mean, I came into it as unexpected, didn't think about it all, didn't think it, wasn't even looking to jump into it. But now that I'm in, man, I really do want to convince and try to help pastors and church leaders, good Christians who are Christian, Christian in a good church or whatever, to run, because I think it's really important, especially on a local level, that we're represented, and instead of just complaining about things, and maybe I mean, what I do doesn't affect Washington, but it really helps on a local level, and it's really helped me a lot to meet a lot of people. So yeah, that's what I do. So 3 years now on our city council in the town of Rio Rancho. I have just over 100,000 people now in our town, and the average age here is 37. So I'm right in the average age range. So can represent the community well from that aspect, and really enjoy it. It's a lot. It's less of a time commitment than I thought, and it's a lot more enjoyable than I thought it would be, and interesting, and it's opened a lot more doors than I knew that it could open. So I would have never jumped in on my own, but I'm glad that I did. And so if I can help any other people to answer some questions, or for them to get involved too, local is the way to go. You are able to meet people and make a difference, and it's easy to start to get involved. So yeah.
Well, our joke with Bo, our producer, kind of the nickname that we've given you, even though this doesn't accurately reflect your title, is Mayor Jeremy. Just, I don't know why Bo came up with that. We find it funny. It's not funny to anybody else. It's an inside joke. Everybody'd love to be a part of one someday. But I think it's really, when you told me that, I was just, you told me, I guess, how long has it been now? 2 years, 3 years?
3 years, yeah.
Say that again. You cut out.
Right at 3 years.
3 years, yeah. So when you told me about it, it was shortly after we had just been out there with you shooting a video project, and we were just like, oh, okay, that's cool, and so that's really awesome. So let's back it up a little bit, and let's talk about. I guess first of all, let's start with some philosophy, if you will, or I guess preference when it comes to. I kind of see, of course, there's extremes of everything, but basically two sides or two schools of thought, more or less. And there is those who are very vocal. I've talked about when it comes to the church leader space, and I guess people in general, but especially church leaders. There are those that are really vocal about politics, and they're endorsing candidates and particular parties and platforms, and they're making a really big deal about politics, and most of the time that's on the national level, or maybe the state level, especially, like I said, we've just come through this vicious election cycle, and so the presidential race is obviously on everybody's mind, and that's the one I'm talking about. And then there's the other side, which takes a completely almost zero public stance when it comes to politics. They say nothing. They don't endorse candidates. They don't endorse parties. They don't, take any sort of, like I said, public platform when it comes to politics. And this can be a really controversial, topic, and as far as point of view and perspective. So I wanted to kind of talk a little. What is your opinion? What is the proper approach, in your opinion, to being vocal about your politics, if you will, politics in the pulpit?
Yeah. So I mean, from the Bible, we know we're supposed to pray for our leaders, no matter who those leaders are. We're supposed to stand up for righteousness, and so I think that that's one thing. Past that, I mean, I know that there are different people that are involved. They have different interest level. So I believe that if you're someone who, you're really interested in politics and you're passionate about it, that I think that God puts that desire in people's hearts in order to serve. Because look, someone's going to be, your city councilor, someone's going to be your state representative, someone's going to be your mayor, or whatever. And I believe that, if it's something you're interested in and God's kind of placed it in your heart to do, that's probably his leading, his prompting to get involved. I think at least that pastors, if we're talking to pastors, if we're talking to church leaders, that you should be involved as far as, knowing and meeting candidates. And if it's people that you can get behind their values, helping them. One of the biggest things that candidates always need, you just think money, and that's true. A lot of these campaigns are really expensive, but just someone to go and to knock on doors for them and to pass out literature and different stuff like that. My city councilor actually, in her 2 races, I had helped her. I'd gone out knocking a little bit. Same thing for the mayor, same thing for one other guy who's running for a county commissioner role. So I'd kind of been willing to get involved, and I think that's one of the things that put me on the mayor's radar. But I think that most people would rather just, it's easier to complain about it and to be frustrated, right, than to actually do something about it. And so I think that, I think that it's good to intentionally talk about politics. Where I think that people mess up, I'm not a pastor, but was talking to pastors, is if we stray off and we're talking about it all the time, we didn't intend to. It's just we got going on our sermon and, might as well say all this other stuff or whatever, But if you're going to intentionally deal with it and talk politics, for example, I think that's fine. And I think I would encourage people to know their candidates, to get involved, their people too. And you can be more of an influence, than you think, even if you're not willing to run yourself, just to get involved. Invite these folks to your church. And there's almost this stigma, which I think is unfair. If a politician ever comes to church, we've actually had 2 come to our church and get saved and join our church. But I remember when they first started coming, people were like, oh, well, they're just here, for the votes, right? Or they're just here because it's time to campaign, And for some people, that's true. They tour their churches, go all around and try to meet a lot of people or whatever, especially if they're of one political party. And so, there's that maybe distrust or whatever. But, when you meet people, especially on the local level, they're a lot more, just people, than they're made out to be sometimes. So I think that's one thing. And 2, I don't know, Luke, what do you think? You talk to a lot of people. Do you think that people are a little too politics in the pulpit, or is it something that now we're going to need to start taking a stand? Because I think the worst thing is to just never say anything and then just let people guess. But maybe you have a different take on that.
Well, so you're talking a lot, kind of a lot of what you've talked about thus far is local politics, local involvement. And from what I see, that is not really the level that, church leaders get vocal about. They tend to make, like I said, with the election cycle and as insane as it was, it's obviously fresh on everyone's mind. So what I notice is, and again, a lot of times it's like, well, all you can see is what people put on Twitter or what people put on social media. But what I see is just this, and almost this fatalism that accompanies, like, if my guy doesn't win the presidency in this case, then it's all over. And it's almost this sense of, hope and just almost like it's like you're putting all your chips in on the president. And so I very much believe in a hands-off approach to government. And, my thing has always been, if we want religious liberty, yes. Obviously that's something that America is built on, and I think it's valuable, and I don't want to see that go away. But putting so much, I guess, stock in, the government in general and the presidency as a church leader. For example, we actually just had a conversation with Nate Skelly last week about this, and he's a financial advisor, so he kind of comes from the financial angle on everything. But I've seen pastors and church leaders, really they changed direction in their leadership as far as what they're going to do and their plan and their vision of their church based on who's in the Oval Office. And based off of maybe a anticipation of some politics that are gonna, or policies that are gonna come down the line that could negatively affect the church. And again, it doesn't happen. It's not that it happened. It's just, oh well, this might happen, so we're gonna hold off. We're gonna do something different. And I don't know. I understand that has to play a factor in it, but on the grand scheme of things, like the mission of the church doesn't change. It doesn't say that you fulfill the mission of the church only if your political party is in office. So I that's for me where I do understand the disagreement there of, well, yeah, we need to be involved, but like I said, you're talking about the local level. I agree. I think that's great. And I think that's where, if people are going to put their energy into politics, that's where they need to put it, not into tweeting and ranting about the presidential race and all this stuff.
Right. So here's my thing. If someone wants to get in, if someone wants to have an opinion, we all have an opinion, especially in our space. Like, everyone has pretty loud opinions because, naturally someone who's a pastor is an opinionated person, which is a good thing, obviously. But my thing is, right, if someone's talking politics and complaining about it, they're talking about Pennsylvania Avenue at the White House, right? And that's good, and we should have an opinion about that. But I think that if you're going to have an opinion, a strong opinion about that, but you've never taken the time to meet with any of your local leaders that you could meet with, right? You could sit down and have a conversation. You as a pastor especially, hey, I'm the pastor of this church in town or whatever, really like to meet with you. You could meet with your local mayor. He would take the time. You could meet with your city councilors or commissioners or aldermen or township trustees, depending on where you live, whatever they call them. You can meet with all of those people. But we don't want to do that. We just want to, say, well, this person over here, is so anti-biblical, therefore they must be the Antichrist. And so I guess opinion and harsh opinion without taking any initiative at all to do any work or to reach out or to make inroads is what's frustrating to me. And that's where a lot of people are. They want to complain, but then they don't want to. Here at our church, we have a meeting for the local party, and they come once a month and they meet or whatever. And honestly, it's filled with people that have a lot of questions and have a lot of complaints. And then at the end of the meeting, it's always like, hey, we got these couple of candidates. If you can sign up to help them go out and to pass out their information and let people know so we can get them elected, please sign up here. And like, no one signs up. Because that's not what they're there for. They're there just to complain about something and go home and feel better about themselves. And to me, that just doesn't, if I'm going to complain about it, I would rather get involved and try to, help it or whatever. So, but what you bring up is a good point. I want to dispel a couple of myths real quick, because when I tell people that I'm in politics or whatever, they immediately think, well, this issue or, an abortion issue or this issue on transgender bathrooms or, and local city stuff is like none of that. So there's 3 different levels, and depending on what you want to be involved in, there's local, like city stuff. And then there's state, that's, representatives and senators, and that's state. And then of course there's national, and that's really big, and we're probably not talking to any of those people today. But on the city level, particularly where I'm at, it's nonpartisan. So you're not going out there and running and you're not registering as a Republican or independent or Democrat. You're just a person running for the city council. So therefore on the council, 90% of what we deal with is land use issues. Can we build this house here? Can we shrink the size of this housing development? This park right here, how should it be maintained? That kind of stuff. The most political thing that we've had to pass in the 3 years I've been there is just continuing on declaring a health emergency, so that if anything happened, we're covered by our insurance. It's not partisan. When I go and talk to people on their door, that's what they want to know. Well, hey, were you a Republican or a Democrat? And, I don't mind telling you, but also it doesn't at all matter because I'm not touching any issues that are party controversial. But also, man, I've met so many people and the doors that have been opened to meet with people from, police chiefs, fire chiefs, business owners, chamber members, schools, right? The mayor, of course, all city hall staff. It's incredible the doors that get opened, through that. But it's nonpartisan, So if that doesn't sound appealing to you at all, then you need to go for something like a state rep or whatever, which is still not beyond your reach. I mean, you could do it. You could run for any of those things, but that is kind of a myth that when I tell people that that's what I do, they automatically start asking me questions about what they heard on Fox or CNN or whatever else, and that's not what we do. We deal with the boring stuff of securing water rights, and stuff like that. So, but I think it's extremely valuable, and I think that you should pursue it. And if you're not willing to pursue it, I think as a pastor, you should at least be willing to take a month or two and meet with these local people. Just tell them what your church is interested in. Can we help in any way? If you have any food drives or any stuff like that, we'd like to be involved, and just get your church like a really good testimony in your community. Every single pastor wants that, and I think it's worth pursuing.
Thanks again for joining us here at Church Media HQ. I'm excited that you would take a moment to be with us, and your time I know is valuable, so it means a lot that you would take some time to spend here with us today. Again, remember to subscribe or like this video if you're watching, and we look forward to being with you next time here on Church Media HQ. But before we go, as always, I want to remind you, it's time to try something new. And why is that? Well, because it is so much better to fail at trying the incredible than to succeed at doing the average. We'll see you next time right here on Church Media HQ.